This story contains themes that some may find unsettling. Listener discretion is advised. They say every city has its secrets, but Viridia is a secret. On the map, it's a shimmering jewel, a testament to modern urban planning and sustainable living. Its manicured parks stretch for miles, its downtown gleams with architectural marvels, and its crime rate is so low it's practically mythical. Viridia is the kind of place people move to for a fresh start, for peace, for the promise of a perfect life. It's nestled in a picturesque valley, surrounded by rolling hills and pristine forests, a bubble of tranquility where every lawn is perfectly green, every street is spotless, and every resident seems genuinely, effortlessly content. For 37 years, Michael lived in Viridia, and for 37 years he believed in its perfection. He was a creature of habit, a man who found comfort in order and predictability. His job as a senior archivist at the Viridia Historical Society suited him perfectly. He spent his days surrounded by the city's meticulously preserved past, cataloging documents, verifying dates, and piecing together the narratives that built this idyllic haven. He knew Viridia's history better than anyone, or so he thought. He knew the founding families, the industrial booms, the civic projects that transformed a sleepy settlement into a lauded metropolis. He knew the official story, the one etched in bronze plaques and celebrated in annual festivals. He loved his city, not with a blind patriot's fervor, but with the quiet appreciation of a scholar who admired its deliberate, almost flawless construction. Then Eleanor Vance vanished. Eleanor wasn't like Michael. She was a whirlwind of eccentricities, a freelance historian with a penchant for obscure theories and a nose for what she called the inconvenient truths of Viridia. She was a regular at the Historical Society, often found hunched over ancient ledgers, muttering to herself about anomalies and inconsistencies. Michael tolerated her, even found her endearing in her own chaotic way. She was a harmless anomaly in Viridia's otherwise placid landscape, but Eleanor had a habit of stumbling onto things that didn't quite fit the official narrative. Things Michael, in his methodical way, had probably filed away without a second thought. The last time Michael saw Eleanor was a Tuesday, a week before she disappeared. She'd burst into his office, her wild gray hair even wilder than usual, her eyes alight with an almost manic excitement. She was clutching a tattered old map, its edges brittle with age. "Michael, you won't believe it," she'd whispered, her voice a conspiratorial hiss. "The foundation. It's all wrong. The dates, the names, it's a house of cards, Michael. A beautiful, glittering house of cards built on something else." He'd humored her, as he always did. "Eleanor, what are you talking about now?" "Not now, Michael. Not here. Meet me Friday, my place. I'll show you. I'll show you everything. This isn't just about Viridia's past. This is about its present, its very soul." Her gaze had been intense, almost pleading. "Promise me you'll come, Michael. This is groundbreaking, earth-shattering even." Michael had promised, mostly to get her to leave. But Friday came and went. Michael, engrossed in a particularly challenging inventory of 19th century land deeds, completely forgot. He only remembered on Saturday morning, a pang of guilt hitting him as he made his usual weekend coffee. He called her. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. By Sunday, a low hum of unease had started in his chest. Eleanor, for all her quirks, was reliable about her appointments, especially when she believed she was on the cusp of a major discovery. He drove to her small, cluttered bungalow on the outskirts of the city. Her ancient, rust-eaten sedan was still in the driveway. The lights were off. He knocked. No answer. He tried the doorknob. Locked. A small, neatly folded note was tucked under the welcome mat. It was written in Eleanor's distinctive, sprawling hand. It simply said, "I'm sorry. They know. Look for the silent architects. They know." Michael muttered, the words chilling him. Silent architects? It sounded like another one of Eleanor's fanciful theories. But the note felt different. Urgent. Fearful. He immediately called the Viridia Police Department. Officer Davis, a young man Michael vaguely recognized from community events, took his report with polite efficiency. He assured Michael they would look into it. "Miss Vance is known for her independent spirit, sir," Officer Davis had said, a hint of a smile in his voice. "She probably just went on one of her research trips without telling anyone." Michael tried to explain about the groundbreaking discovery, the house of cards, The silent architects. Officer Davis's smile remained, but his eyes glazed over slightly. "We'll check it out, Mr. Reynolds. Don't you worry." But Michael did worry. He worried all Sunday night. He couldn't shake the image of Eleanor's frantic eyes, her whispered warning. He tried to rationalize it. Eleanor was eccentric. She probably just went off the grid. But the note? They know. The next morning, Monday, Michael called the police again. He was transferred to Detective Miller, a seasoned officer with a calm, reassuring voice. "Mr. Reynolds, we've been to Ms. Vance's residence. Everything appears to be in order. No signs of forced entry. Her car is there. Neighbors haven't seen anything unusual. We've put out a missing persons alert, but honestly, it just looks like she decided to take an impromptu trip." "But her note," Michael insisted. "She said they know." She was scared. Detective Miller paused, a slight shift in his tone. "Mr. Reynolds, with all due respect, Ms. Vance had a reputation for colorful theories. We found no evidence to suggest foul play. Her apartment was neat, almost as if she tidied up before leaving. There was a travel bag packed by the door. We believe she simply left." Tidied up. Michael felt a cold dread spread through him. Eleanor's apartment was never neat. It was a glorious, chaotic monument to disorganized research, filled with stacks of books, loose papers, and half-eaten meals. The idea of it being neat was more disturbing than a ransacked mess. He went back to Eleanor's bungalow that afternoon. The police tape was gone. The front door was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. The air inside was still scentless. Detective Miller had been right. The apartment was, for Eleanor, scrupulously tidy. Books were shelved in alphabetical order, papers stacked in neat piles. The dusty old map Eleanor had shown him was nowhere to be seen. Even the lingering scent of stale coffee and old paper was gone, replaced by a faint chemical smell, like industrial cleaner. It was too clean, too perfect, just like Viridia itself. He walked through the small rooms, a growing sense of violation washing over him. This wasn't Eleanor's home. It was a stage set. He searched meticulously, methodically, just as he would an archive. He checked under loose floorboards, behind bookshelves, inside old tea canisters. Nothing. He was about to give up when he noticed it. A faint, almost invisible scratch on the underside of her antique writing desk. It wasn't a random mark. It was a precise, deliberate etching. A tiny, intricate symbol he'd never seen before, almost like a stylized, interlocking set of gears. Next to it, carved even smaller, were the letters, VOS. Michael stared at the symbol, then at the letters. Was Viridia official seal? No, the city seal was a soaring eagle. This was something else. Something hidden. Something Eleanor had found and tried to leave behind. He spent the rest of the week digging, not in the official archives, but in the forgotten corners of Viridia's history. He revisited old microfilms, obscure town council minutes, and the personal journals of long-dead citizens that Eleanor had always been so fascinated by. He started seeing the city differently. The perfect lawns seemed a little too uniform. The contented smiles of the residents felt a little too practiced. The efficiency of the police, once a source of civic pride, now felt chillingly precise. Every question he asked about Eleanor was met with polite evasiveness, a subtle shift in conversation, a swift change of subject. He felt eyes on him, not overtly, but a sense of being observed, a faint pressure in the air. He went to the local library, poring over books on symbology, secret societies, anything that might shed light on the symbol or the letters VOS. He found nothing. It was like the symbol didn't exist or was too obscure to be cataloged. The more he looked, the more he realized that Viridia wasn't just a city that had secrets. It was a city built on them, sustained by them, its very foundation rooted in something carefully, meticulously concealed. Eleanor hadn't just discovered a historical anomaly. She had stumbled upon the living, breathing heart of Viridia's carefully constructed illusion. And now Michael was starting to see the cracks. He was starting to feel the chill wind blowing through them. One evening, back in his own quiet apartment, the symbol from Eleanor's desk burned in his mind. He opened his laptop, pulling up old city planning documents Eleanor had once mentioned, specifically those related to Viridia's original infrastructure. He zoomed in on a schematic for the city's underground water purification system, a marvel of engineering from the early 20th century. And there it was, Not the symbol, not directly, but a small, almost imperceptible watermark on the corner of the schematic, a faint outline beneath the official seals. It was the stylized interlocking gears. The VOS letters were there too, tiny, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. This wasn't just a random carving. This was a signature, a mark, and it was tied to the very physical infrastructure of Viridia. The silent architects weren't just a metaphor. They were real, and they had been here from the very beginning. Michael felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't just looking for a missing person anymore. He was looking at the hidden blueprint of his entire world. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that whatever Eleanor had uncovered, whatever they knew, was far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He had just pulled on a thread, and now the entire beautiful glittering house of cards was starting to sway. The realization hit Michael like a physical blow. The careful, almost clinical grief he'd been processing shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces of dread. Eleanor's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a message, a warning. And he, by simply caring enough to look, had stumbled right into the crosshairs. The note, clutched in his hand, felt colder than the metal box it had come from. They know. You have to tell them. Tell who? What did they know? And who were they? The question screamed in his mind, echoing in the sudden, oppressive silence of Eleanor's pristine apartment. He looked around the room, no longer seeing a comforting space filled with memories, but a meticulously cleaned crime scene. Every object seemed to hold a sinister double meaning, every shadow a lurking threat. He felt a prickle on the back of his neck, an irrational certainty that he wasn't alone, that unseen eyes were already watching, already assessing his next move. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching fear. He had to be calm. He had to think. For Eleanor. Michael carefully placed the note back into the hidden compartment, then closed the metal box and returned it to its original spot. He smoothed the loose floorboard back into place, making sure it was undetectable. He couldn't risk anyone else finding it, not yet. Not until he understood. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations with Eleanor from the past few months. She had been different, more withdrawn, often lost in thought. He'd attributed it to the stress of her high-pressure job as a senior data analyst at Viridian Dynamics, one of the city's most influential tech firms. Viridian, with its gleaming towers and impenetrable data centers, was practically the nervous system of the city, handling everything from municipal infrastructure to private financial records. They boasted of unparalleled security, of being the digital guardians of the metropolis. But what if they were guarding something else entirely? Something far more sinister? He remembered her late nights, the way her eyes would sometimes dart around, as if searching for something or someone, even when they were alone. She joked about the ghosts in the machine, about secrets buried in the code. He dismissed it as work-related jargon, the quirky humor of a brilliant mind. Now those jokes sounded like desperate cries for help. He needed to start where Eleanor had spent most of her waking hours, her work. But how could he access anything without raising suspicion? He was a consultant, not an employee of Viridian. He couldn't just walk in and demand answers. He pulled out his phone, his fingers hovering over his contact list. Who could he trust? Who knew Eleanor well enough, but wasn't so deeply entrenched in Viridian that they'd be compromised? A name flickered in his memory: Jessica Chun. Jessica was Eleanor's closest colleague, her cubicle neighbor, her often confidant during lunch breaks. Eleanor had spoken of Jessica with a mix of affection and professional respect, but also a hint of something else, something Michael couldn't quite place at the time. Maybe caution? Or was he just projecting his current paranoia onto past memories? He decided to call Jessica. Not now, not from Eleanor's apartment. He needed to get out to a neutral space to clear his head. He quickly gathered his few belongings, trying to make his exit appear as normal as possible. As he locked Eleanor's door, he scanned the hallway, then the street below. No one seemed out of place, no unmarked vans, no shadowy figures. But the feeling of being watched persisted, a cold knot in his stomach. Back in his own apartment, the familiar surroundings offered little comfort. He paced, the cryptic note burning in his mind. They know. You have to tell them. The urgency was palpable. What if Eleanor had been trying to tell him? What if he was them? No, that didn't make sense. Tell them. It implied a third party, an ally she was reaching out to, a group or an individual who could expose whatever they knew. He stared at his reflection in the darkened window. He was just Michael, an average guy, a project manager, suddenly thrust into a world of espionage and deadly secrets. He wasn't equipped for this, but he couldn't back down. Not when Eleanor's life was at stake, even if it was already lost. Her legacy, her truth depended on him. He waited until late afternoon, giving himself time to compose his thoughts, to craft a believable reason for contacting Jessica. He called her, his voice carefully modulated to convey sorrow and concern, but nothing more. "Jessica? It's Michael, Eleanor's friend." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then a soft, almost hesitant voice. "Michael? Oh, I'm so sorry. I still can't believe it." "Me neither," Michael said, his voice genuinely heavy with grief. "It's just, I'm trying to make sense of things. I was wondering if you had any of her personal effects from the office? Or if there was anything she mentioned, anything at all, that might help me understand what happened. The police, they just ruled it an accident, but..." He trailed off, letting the unspoken question hang in the air. Jessica sighed. "I know, Michael. It's hard. Everyone at Viridian is reeling. Eleanor she was brilliant. Irreplaceable." There was a pause. As for her things, her desk was cleared out by HR, standard procedure. They said they'd send everything to her next of kin. "I haven't seen anything unusual, just her usual work stuff." "Anything unusual before?" Michael pressed gently. Was she acting strangely? Worried about anything? Another pause, longer this time. Michael could almost hear Jessica weighing her words. "Eleanor was always intense, you know that. But yes, lately she was even more so. Distracted. She'd be deep in thought, sometimes muttering to herself. She spent a lot of time in the secure archives, more than usual. And she started taking her lunch alone, which wasn't like her. She usually loved gossiping with us." "Secure archive." Michael latched onto the phrase. "What kind of archives?" "Oh, just the standard Viridian data repositories," Jessica said, her tone a little too casual. "Where we keep all the old project files, municipal contracts, the really sensitive stuff. She was working on some major infrastructure project, I think. Something about the city's new smart grid initiative." The smart grid initiative. Michael remembered Eleanor mentioning it. A massive project to integrate all of the city's utilities, power, water, traffic, even public safety cameras, into one hyper-efficient, AI-driven network. A project that would give Viridian unprecedented access and control over the very fabric of the city. A project that could, if compromised, bring the entire metropolis to its knees. "Did she ever mention anything specific about it?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice even. "Any problems? Any anomalies?" "Not to me directly," Jessica replied. She was very tight-lipped about it, said it was above her pay grade to discuss specifics, but I did get the impression she was frustrated, like she was hitting a wall, or uncovering something she didn't like. "Uncovering what?" "I don't know, Michael. She just said things like, 'The more you dig, the dirtier it gets,' or 'This city runs on more than just electricity.' I thought she was just being dramatic, you know? Eleanor loved a good mystery." Jessica's laugh was brittle, humorless. She even joked once that the city itself was a giant secret, and we're all just living inside it. The city that runs on secrets. The title of Eleanor's hidden message, the very phrase that had haunted him since he found it. Jessica had just uttered it, almost verbatim. Couldn't be a coincidence. "Did she ever mention anyone specifically?" Michael pressed, his heart pounding. "Anyone she was working with? Or someone she was concerned about?" "No, not really. She mostly worked alone on that project. I mean, she had her direct manager, David Miller, and the head of the department, Emily Hayes. But she didn't express any specific concerns about them, just the project itself." Jessica's voice began to sound strained, as if she was getting uncomfortable. "Look, Michael, I really wish I could help more, but I honestly don't know anything concrete. I'm just as heartbroken and confused as you are." "I understand, Jessica. Thank you for talking to me. It means a lot." Michael ended the call, his mind a whirlwind. Jessica had confirmed his suspicions, unintentionally. Eleanor was investigating something big connected to Viridian and the city's infrastructure. And the phrase, "the city that runs on secrets," wasn't just a poetic flourish. It was a direct reference to what Eleanor had discovered. He looked at his phone, then back at the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a glittering tapestry of false promise. Beneath the surface, he now knew was a dark, churning undercurrent. Eleanor had pulled back the curtain, and now he was seeing it too. He had to get into Viridian. He had to find out what Eleanor had found in those secure archives. He had to find out what they knew, and he had to find out who them was before it was too late. He felt a chilling certainty that the clock was already ticking, and he was already being watched. The stakes had just escalated beyond grief, beyond suspicion. He was no longer just a friend seeking answers. He was a target, a potential witness, a loose end. And in a city that ran on secrets, loose ends tended to disappear. The thought was a jolt of ice water to David's gut. He wasn't just investigating, he was being watched. The stakes had just escalated beyond grief, beyond suspicion. He was no longer just a friend seeking answers. He was a target, a potential witness, a loose end. And in a city that ran on secrets, loose ends tended to disappear. His breath caught, a cold knot tightening in his chest. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every glint of light on a windowpane felt like a lens. He forced himself to walk, one foot in front of the other, maintaining a casual pace, but his mind was a whirlwind of frantic calculations. The cafe, the street outside, the entire district suddenly felt like a stage, and he was the unwilling performer. He had to disappear, to shake whoever it was, and he had to do it now. He didn't run. Running would draw attention, confirm their suspicions. Instead, he weaved through the afternoon crowd, making subtle detours. He ducked into a bustling bookstore, pretending to browse the crime fiction section, his eyes darting to the reflective surface of a large mirror. Nothing obvious. No one in a trench coat, no one conspicuously staring. But that was the most unsettling part. The absence of an obvious tale often meant a highly skilled one. He exited the bookstore through a rear alley, a narrow, graffiti-laden passage he knew would lead to a different street. He hailed a taxi, gave a random address across town, then paid the driver after only a few blocks, stepping out into a crowded market. He let the sensory overload of vendors hawking their wares, the cacophony of voices, the vibrant chaos wash over him, using it as cover. He bought a newspaper, folded it, and then, using its reflective pages as a crude mirror, scanned the faces around him. Still nothing. The paranoia was a living thing, squirming in his stomach. He felt exposed, vulnerable, like a deer caught in high beams. He took a bus, riding it for several stops, then abruptly got off in a residential area he barely recognized. He walked for what felt like miles, circling blocks, changing directions, until he felt a tiny, almost imperceptible easing of the tension. He wasn't sure he'd lost them, but he was at least out of their immediate sight. Finally, exhausted and mentally drained, David made it back to his own apartment. He locked the door with a trembling hand, then threw the deadbolt, adding the chain for good measure. He pulled the blinds tight, plunging the living room into a dim, uneasy twilight. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving him hollow, cold. He slumped onto his couch, the weight of the realization pressing down on him. Why him? He was just David Miller, a graphic designer, Olivia Hayes' friend. He wasn't a threat. He hadn't uncovered anything concrete. He had just asked questions, poked around the edges of a tragedy. But in the city that ran on secrets, questions were dangerous. Olivia. Her face flashed in his mind, vibrant, determined, always searching for the truth. He remembered her in the weeks leading up to her death. She had been different, more withdrawn, her usual spark replaced by a quiet intensity. She'd spent countless late nights hunched over her laptop, her phone always nearby, often on silent. She'd made vague references to a big story, something that could shake things up, but she'd always brushed off his attempts to pry for details, citing journalistic ethics and the need for absolute secrecy. He'd put it down to her usual dedication, her passion for investigative journalism. Now it felt like a desperate plea for help he hadn't understood. She wasn't just working on a story. She was in a story, a dangerous one. The official police report, the one that ruled her death an accidental fall, now seemed like a flimsy veil, easily torn away. Someone wanted her silence, and now they wanted his. What had Olivia been working on? The last official assignment he knew of was a seemingly mundane piece about urban redevelopment projects in the older districts of the city. A dry topic, hardly the kind of expose that would put her life in danger. But Olivia had a knack for finding the rot beneath the surface, for peeling back layers to reveal the ugliness hidden within the mundane. He remembered her meticulousness. Olivia didn't just write stories, she built cases. She had backups for her backups, encrypted files, burner phones for sensitive sources. The idea that she would simply accidentally fall from her balcony, leaving no trace of her dangerous work, felt utterly wrong. She would have had a contingency, a dead man's switch, something to ensure her truth got out if anything happened to her. And then it hit him. The USB drive. It wasn't just any USB drive. It was a small, sleek metallic device, no bigger than his thumb, that she always kept on her keychain. She joked once that it contained the secrets of the universe, her insurance policy. He'd seen her with it countless times, almost an extension of her hand, but he hadn't seen it at her apartment after her death. The police hadn't mentioned it. He hadn't even thought to look for it, dismissed it as a personal accessory. Where would she hide it? Not in plain sight. Not in her laptop, which would have been the first thing seized. It would be somewhere unexpected, somewhere she knew only he might think to look, or somewhere so obscure it would be missed by anyone else. He had to go back to her apartment. The thought of returning to Olivia's apartment, knowing he was being watched, sent a fresh wave of dread through him. But the USB drive, or whatever hidden information she might have left, was his only lead. It was a risk he had to take. He couldn't just sit here waiting to be found. He had to move to think like Olivia. He waited until the dead of night. The city, usually a symphony of light and sound, was muted, cloaked in a heavy silence that felt more ominous than comforting. He dressed in dark clothing, pulled a baseball cap low over his eyes, and took a circuitous route to Olivia's building, avoiding main roads, sticking to dimly lit side streets. Every shadow seemed to lengthen and twist, every distant siren a chilling reminder of the danger he was courting. He approached Olivia's building with extreme caution. The lobby was empty, the hallway quiet. He used the old spare key she'd given him years ago, a relic from a time when their biggest worry was who would feed her cat when she went on assignment. The lock clicked with a startling loudness in the oppressive silence. He pushed the door open slowly, a sliver of darkness giving way to the deeper gloom within. The apartment was cold, sterile, still bearing the faint, unsettling scent of disinfectant from the forensics team. Everything was orderly, almost too orderly, as if scrubbed clean of any lingering chaos or emotion. It felt violated, not by him, but by the unseen forces that had orchestrated Olivia's demise. He moved through the apartment like a phantom, his footsteps barely audible on the hardwood floors. He didn't turn on any lights, relying on the faint glow from the city outside filtering through the blinds. He went straight to her desk, not to rummage through the drawers, but to examine the structure itself. Olivia was clever. She hid things in plain sight, or in the most unlikely of places. He ran his hands along the underside of the desk, feeling for loose panels. He checked the backs of her bookshelves, the frames of her artwork. He even checked the potted plants, remembering her quirky habit of hiding spare change in the soil. Nothing. The USB drive wasn't on her keychain, it wasn't in her purse, and it wasn't in any of the obvious spots. He started thinking about her process, her habits. Olivia was old school in some ways, despite her tech savviness. She loved physical notebooks, jotting down ideas, sketching concepts. He remembered her mentioning a thinking space, a place where she'd go to clear her head and organize her thoughts. It wasn't a physical location, but a mental one, often accompanied by a specific, almost ritualistic action. He scanned the room again, trying to see it through her eyes. What would be overlooked? What seemed ordinary but held a secret? His gaze fell upon a small antique wooden chest on a low coffee table, filled with old postcards and trinkets. He'd seen it 100 times. Seemed innocuous. But as he reached for it, his hand brushed against the underside of the table. There. A faint, almost imperceptible seam in the wood. He pressed along it, feeling a slight give. With a gentle push, a small shallow drawer slid out from beneath the table's surface. It was cleverly designed, hidden within the table's thick frame. Inside, nestled on a piece of soft velvet, was not the USB drive, but something else entirely. A small leather-bound journal. It was worn, its pages slightly yellowed, and it was undeniably Olivia's. Her distinct, elegant handwriting was visible on the cover, a single stylized O embossed on the leather. This was her personal journal, her sanctuary for thoughts, not her professional notes. He picked it up, feeling the weight of it, the cold dread turning into a thrill of discovery. This was it. This was her truth hidden away. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages in the dim light. It wasn't a straightforward narrative. It was filled with cryptic entries, shorthand, dates, and what looked like coded messages. Names were scrawled in the margins, fragmented notes about meetings, locations, and what appeared to be financial figures. One name leaped out at him, recurring several times: Elias Vance. And then a symbol he hadn't noticed before, drawn meticulously next to several entries. A stylized C enveloped by a perfect circle. It was a logo, a brand, a mark. For what, he couldn't yet tell. As he stared at the journal, the weight of its secrets pressing down on him, a faint creak echoed from the hallway outside the apartment. It was subtle, barely audible, but in the profound silence of the night, it was deafening. His heart leaped into his throat. He froze, every muscle tensing, the journal clutched tight in his hand. He wasn't alone. Someone else was here. Someone else was looking for this journal. He heard another sound, a soft scrape like fabric against wood, just outside the door. They were close, too close, and he was trapped. He had the journal, Olivia's final secret, but he was holding a ticking time bomb, and the fuse had just been lit. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the sudden, terrifying realization. The scrape. It wasn't just outside the door, it was the door. Someone was testing the handle, a soft click, then a gentle push. He was frozen, the journal clutched in his hand, its weight now feeling like a lead anchor. There was no time to think, only to react. His eyes darted around the small, cluttered living room. The front door was a death trap. The window, too high, too visible, and certainly not an option without attracting attention. He remembered a small kitchenette off to the side, barely a galley, and a door leading to what he assumed was a cramped bedroom. Desperation fueled his movements. He didn't run. He flowed, a silent shadow, slipping into the bedroom just as the first faint creak of the front door opening reached his ears. The bedroom was even smaller, dominated by a single bed and a dresser. A narrow window, half obscured by dusty blinds, looked out onto a grimy alleyway. Not ideal, but better than nothing. He pressed himself against the wall, straining to hear over the rapid pulse in his ears. Footsteps. 2, maybe 3 sets, heavy and deliberate, moving through the living room. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. They knew he was here. A voice, low and gravelly, cut through the silence. "He's in here. I heard him." Another voice, sharper, colder. "Check the bedroom. And don't mess this up, Michael." Michael. A common name, a terrifying presence. David's stomach lurched. He had to move. The window. He fumbled with the latch, his fingers clumsy with fear. It was old, stiff, and refused to budge. He gritted his teeth, yanked harder, and with a protesting groan, it sprang open a few inches. Not enough. He braced his foot against the wall, pulled with all his might, and the entire sash rattled violently, then gave way, sliding upwards with a screech that seemed to rip through the air. "He's at the window." Michael's voice, closer now, just outside the bedroom door. David didn't hesitate. He scrambled onto the sill, ignoring the sharp pain as splintered wood dug into his palms. He was a good 20 feet up, and the alley below was a chaotic jumble of overflowing dumpsters and fire escapes. He could hear them now, right behind him, the heavy thud of their boots on the wooden floor. He swung his legs over, dangling precariously, the journal still clenched in his hand. He couldn't drop it. He wouldn't drop it. His foot found the rusted rung of a fire escape ladder. He didn't know it was there, but he seized the opportunity, sliding down rung by painful rung, the metal biting into his hands. He heard a crash above him, glass shattering, as someone likely tried to follow him through the window. He didn't look back. He just descended, adrenaline coursing through his veins, until his feet hit the grimy asphalt of the alleyway. He landed awkwardly, stumbling forward, nearly losing his balance. His ankle twisted with a jolt of pain, but he ignored it, pushing himself into a run. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. The alley was a maze of shadows and trash, a perfect place to disappear, but also a perfect place to be cornered. He could hear shouts from above, the heavy thud of footsteps on the fire escape as they tried to follow. He ducked behind a towering stack of cardboard boxes, his breath ragged, heart pounding like a drum solo. He pressed himself against the damp brick wall, trying to control his breathing, trying to think. They were still up there scanning the alley. He had to be smarter, faster. He glanced down at the journal, its dark leather cover almost glowing in the dim light. This was what they wanted. This was why they were hunting him. He spotted a gap between two dumpsters, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. He took a deep breath, flattened himself and pushed, scraping his shoulder against the rough metal. He emerged onto a quieter side street, lined with parked cars. No one immediately visible. He started walking, trying to appear casual, like someone just out for a late-night stroll. Despite his disheveled appearance and the throbbing pain in his ankle, he kept to the shadows, moving swiftly but without drawing attention. He needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere he could examine the journal. His apartment was out. They likely knew where he lived, or would find out soon enough. He needed an untraceable location. A public place? Too risky. A friend's place? He didn't want to put anyone else in danger. He was alone in this. His mind raced, sifting through options. He remembered a small, obscure diner he sometimes visited late at night, tucked away in an older part of the city, known for its anonymity. It was open 24/7, and the owner, an elderly man named George, was famously unobservant. It was a long shot, but it was the best he had. He flagged down a passing taxi, giving the address, forcing his voice to sound steady despite the tremor in his hands. The ride was a blur of paranoid glances out the window, every car, every shadow a potential threat. He clutched the journal tightly, feeling its secrets radiating through his palm. It wasn't just Olivia's diary anymore. It was a weapon, a shield, and a target. When the taxi finally pulled up to the diner, a greasy beacon in the pre-dawn gloom, David paid quickly and slipped inside. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and frying onions. Only a few patrons were scattered at the booths, hunched over their meals, lost in their own late-night solitude. George, a man with a perpetually tired expression and a stained apron, grunted a greeting from behind the counter. David slid into a booth in the farthest corner, his back to the wall, where he could see the entrance. He ordered a black coffee, his hand still shaking slightly. He waited until George had retreated to the grill, until the initial rush of adrenaline began to recede, replaced by a cold, persistent dread. Then, with trembling fingers, he pulled out Olivia's journal. The leather was soft, worn from years of use. He opened it to the page he had seen before, the one with the strange symbols and coded messages. He'd only had a fleeting glimpse, but now, in the relative safety of the diner booth, he could study it. The symbols weren't random. They looked like a rudimentary cipher, a substitution code perhaps, but more complex. And the words, though written in plain English, seemed to reference things he couldn't quite grasp. He flipped through the preceding pages. Olivia's handwriting was elegant, precise. She wrote about her daily life, mundane observations, but interspersed with increasingly cryptic entries. Dates, times, locations that held no immediate meaning to him. Then he found it. A page near the middle, folded over several times, almost hidden. He unfolded it gently. It wasn't a diary entry. It was a map. A crudely drawn map of a section of the city, but instead of street names, there were symbols just like the ones in the coded message. And one location was circled prominently, marked with a distinct jagged star. Underneath it, in tiny, almost invisible script, were two words: the Nexus. The Nexus. The name sent a shiver down his spine. It sounded important, central. But what was it? A place? An organization? And why was it marked on a map that seemed to be a key to Olivia's secrets? He remembered the strange symbol he'd seen on the ring Olivia wore, the one he'd found in her apartment. It wasn't exactly the same, but it had a similar angular, almost geometric quality. Was there a connection? He looked closer at the map. It seemed to focus on the older, industrial part of the city, an area known for its abandoned warehouses and forgotten factories. Not a place anyone would visit casually. He tried to cross-reference it with a mental map of the city, but the symbols made it impossible. He needed a key, a legend. He flipped back to the coded messages. Was the key hidden there? He stared at the jumble of letters and symbols, trying to find a pattern. Nothing. He wasn't a cryptographer. He needed help. But who could he trust? The thought of involving anyone else filled him with a fresh wave of anxiety. Olivia had trusted someone, and look what happened to her. He took a sip of his cold coffee, his mind racing. He was deep in this now. He had escaped, but he was no closer to understanding what Olivia had uncovered, or why it had cost her her life. He was holding the key, but he couldn't unlock the door. Then his gaze fell on a small, almost imperceptible detail on the map. A tiny, almost invisible watermark in the corner. It wasn't a logo, but a series of interconnected lines, forming a complex knot. He'd seen something similar before. Where? He racked his brain, the memory tantalizingly out of reach. It was in Olivia's apartment, on one of the scattered papers on her desk. A subtle, almost decorative border on a seemingly innocuous document. He hadn't paid it any mind then, dismissing it as a design flourish. But now, seeing it on this map, it felt significant. This wasn't just Olivia's personal code. It was part of something larger. He realized then that this journal wasn't just a diary of secrets. It was a meticulously crafted puzzle. Olivia hadn't just written down her discoveries. She had encoded them, knowing that if it fell into the wrong hands, it would be unreadable. She was expecting this. She had planned for it. And he, David, was now the unwitting recipient of her final desperate message. The realization brought a fresh wave of determination. Olivia hadn't died in vain. She had left a breadcrumb trail, and he was following it. He was a journalist trained to uncover truths, to connect disparate pieces of information. This was the biggest story of his life, and it was personal. He carefully refolded the map, tucking it back into the journal. He couldn't risk leaving it open, not even here. He scanned the diner again. Still relatively empty. George was humming softly as he wiped down the counter. Felt safe for now. But he couldn't stay here. He needed to work. He needed to analyze this. He needed to find a way to decipher the code, to understand the nexus. He thought about his few contacts, his network of sources. Most were legitimate, above board. But he did know one person, a former colleague from his university days, Emily, who had a reputation for delving into the more obscure corners of information, a brilliant but eccentric hacker and cryptographer. She was a long shot and notoriously private, but if anyone could help him, it was her. He knew where she lived, a small, unassuming brownstone in a quiet residential neighborhood. It was a risk approaching her. She hated being disturbed, but he had no other option. He had the journal, a map to the nexus, and a target on his back. He had to keep moving, keep digging. He finished his coffee, the bitter taste a stark reminder of the danger he was in. He left a generous tip for George, then pushed himself out of the booth. As he stepped back out into the pre-dawn chill, the city was slowly waking up. But for David, the night wasn't over. It had just begun. He was no longer just a reporter investigating a missing person. He was a man on the run, a guardian of secrets, and he was about to knock on the door of the one person who might just hold the key to unlocking Olivia's final truth, and perhaps the truth about the city that runs on secrets. The address was unassuming, a brownstone tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street that felt miles removed from the gleaming towers of the financial district. Number 17B. Michael checked the crumpled note again, a tiny slip of paper Olivia had once given him years ago, almost as a joke, saying, "If I ever disappear, Evelyn knows where the bodies are buried," metaphorically, of course. He hadn't thought much of it then, but now it felt like a lifeline. He took a deep breath, the chill autumn air biting at his exposed skin, and knocked. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of the evening. A moment passed, then another. No answer. He felt a familiar surge of frustration, the kind that had been his constant companion since Olivia vanished. Was this a dead end too? Just as he was about to turn, the door creaked open, revealing a sliver of light and the wary face of an older woman. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, were framed by spectacles perched on the end of her nose. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a faded, oversized cardigan over what looked like sensible academic attire. This had to be Dr. Evelyn Reed. "Can I help you?" Her voice was gravelly, laced with an unmistakable undercurrent of suspicion. She didn't open the door any wider, her gaze sweeping over Michael, assessing him. "Derv Reed? My name is Michael Hayes. I'm looking for Olivia Sterling." He tried to keep his voice calm, but the tremor of desperation was hard to hide. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Olivia Sterling? I haven't heard that name in a long time." And I certainly don't discuss my private research with strangers, Mr. Hayes. She made to close the door. Wait, Michael interjected, pushing his foot gently into the gap. Please, this isn't about research. Olivia. She's missing. I think she's in danger. And I think you might be the only person who knows what she was truly working on. Evelyn paused, her expression unreadable. Missing, you say? There was a flicker of something in her eyes, a recognition, perhaps even a concern, quickly masked. The official story is that she left the city for a new opportunity. A lucrative one, I heard. Her tone was skeptical, almost mocking. That's not true, Michael insisted. She wouldn't just leave without a word. Not to me. Not without her research. She was onto something big, Evelyn. Something about the city. About how it operates. He took a gamble, remembering a cryptic phrase Olivia often used when she was deep into her more controversial historical dives. She called it the deep currents, the hidden systems that make everything else flow. Evelyn's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She studied Michael for a long moment, then sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. She finally opened the door, stepping back to allow him entry. Come in, Mr. Hayes. Before someone decides we're having too interesting a conversation on the doorstep. The interior was a labyrinth of books, papers, and towering shelves filled with binders and digital archives. The air smelled of old paper and dust, a comforting scent to Michael, reminding him of Olivia's own study. Evelyn led him to a small, cluttered living area dominated by a large antique desk overflowing with documents. She gestured to a worn armchair. Sit, and tell me everything from the beginning. And don't leave out a single detail, because if Olivia is truly missing and not just relocated, then we're talking about something far more dangerous than just a simple disappearance. Michael recounted the story, starting from the last time he saw Olivia, the cryptic message, his own investigation, the strange men, the empty apartment, the coded hard drive, even the chilling encounter with Officer David Miller. Evelyn listened intently, her gaze never leaving his face, occasionally nodding or making a soft, almost inaudible sound. When he finished, the room was silent, save for the hum of an old computer in the corner. So you believe Olivia stumbled onto a truth that the city's architects, the ones who truly pull the strings, don't want exposed, Evelyn summarized, her voice quiet. And you think I can help because I specialize in digging up inconvenient facts about this city's past. She trusted you, Michael said simply. She told me you were the only one who truly understood the historical underpinnings of this place. The real history, not the sanitized version. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. Olivia was brilliant, tenacious to a fault. And yes, she had a knack for seeing the patterns in the chaos, for connecting dots that others dismissed as coincidence. She consulted me on several occasions, mostly about historical land deeds, old corporate charters, and the original families who settled this region. She was particularly interested in the period immediately following the industrial boom, when this city truly began to take its modern shape. Was she working on anything specific that seemed sensitive? Michael pressed, his heart pounding with renewed hope. Evelyn hesitated, her eyes drifting towards a stack of old maps on a nearby table. Olivia had a theory, a rather outlandish one, most people would say. She believed that the city's current power structure wasn't just a result of natural economic evolution or political maneuvering. She thought it was a deliberately constructed system, designed centuries ago, to concentrate power and wealth into the hands of a very select few. She called it the Foundation Protocol. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. The Foundation Protocol. It sounded like something out of a dystopian novel, yet it resonated with everything he'd seen. And what exactly is this protocol? That's what she was trying to uncover, Evelyn explained, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She believed it was a series of agreements, hidden clauses in forgotten charters, secret societies, even architectural designs that subtly reinforced this power structure. She thought it went back to the very first major corporations and families that established the city's infrastructure, the ones who built the original banks, the utility companies, the shipping lanes. She kept talking about the original sin of the city, claiming it was woven into its very fabric. So, she was looking for a historical blueprint of control? Michael asked, trying to grasp the enormity of it. More than that, Evelyn corrected. She was looking for proof that this blueprint was still actively enforced, still shaping every major decision, every significant development. She thought certain individuals, descendants of the original architects, were still operating under these protocols, invisible to the public eye, but absolute in their authority. Did she find anything? Evelyn reached for a heavy leather-bound ledger from a shelf, its pages yellowed with age. She came to me a few months ago, agitated. She'd found something in the city's original land registry, a series of seemingly innocuous transactions from the late 1800s. They involved vast swathes of underdeveloped land being transferred to a series of shell corporations, all linked back to a single obscure trust. A trust that, officially, dissolved decades ago, but whose beneficiaries were never fully disclosed. And these beneficiaries? Michael prompted, leaning forward. That's the key, Evelyn said, tapping a dusty page in the ledger. Olivia believed these beneficiaries were the original architects of the Foundation Protocol, and she thought she'd found a pattern, a recurring symbol in the signatures and seals of these documents, a symbol she'd also seen subtly incorporated into some of the city's oldest public buildings, even in the stylized logo of a very powerful modern financial institution. Michael felt a jolt. A symbol. He remembered the strange, almost geometric etching he'd seen on the underside of Olivia's desk, and again fleetingly on one of the documents Officer Miller had been handling. Could it be the same one? What was the symbol? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Evelyn hesitated, her gaze becoming distant. She didn't show it to me. She was too paranoid by then. She said she'd coded it into her final project notes. She was working on something she called the Obsidian Compendium. A digital archive, she said, that would lay bare the entire structure. She was planning to release it, Michael. The whole truth for everyone to see. The Obsidian Compendium, Michael repeated, a new piece of the puzzle slotting into place. That must be what's on the encrypted hard drive. The one I found in her apartment. Evelyn's eyes widened again, this time with genuine alarm. You have it? Michael, that's incredibly dangerous. If what Olivia suspected is true, then holding that compendium makes you a target of the highest order. The people she was investigating, they don't just relocate inconvenient individuals. They silence them. Permanently. Michael felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. I know, but I also know it's Olivia's last stand. I have to unlock it. Do you know anything about how to access it? Any clues she might have left? Evelyn closed the ledger with a soft thud. She was always meticulous with her security, but she did mention something once, a contingency. If anything ever happened to her, she said the key to her final work wouldn't be a password, but a memory. A specific, shared memory, a place or an event that held deep personal significance to her, but also had a subtle historical resonance within the city. Something that would connect her personal truth to the city's hidden truth. A memory? Michael frowned. Olivia had so many. How could he possibly guess? And she also mentioned, Evelyn continued, her voice grave, that she had left a physical clue. Something small, something easily overlooked but intrinsically linked to this memory. A breadcrumb, she called it, for the person she trusted most to follow. She paused, her eyes penetrating Michael's. She trusted you, Michael. She always did. And she knew you'd be the one to come looking. Evelyn then stood, walked to a dusty bookshelf, and pulled out a single unassuming paperback. It was a worn copy of an obscure local history book, one Michael had never seen Olivia read. She handed it to him. Olivia left this here with me about a month before she disappeared. She told me, if anyone ever asks about my Obsidian Compendium, tell them to look within these pages for the first step. Tell them the truth is etched in stone, and in the forgotten whispers of the past. Evelyn's finger traced a faint, almost invisible mark on the spine of the book. A tiny stylized symbol, identical to the one etched on Olivia's desk. The same one Michael had seen on Miller's documents. The symbol of the Foundation Protocol. This symbol, Michael breathed. I've seen it before. Exactly, Evelyn whispered, her gaze fixed on the book. And I believe this book holds the first clue, the key to unlocking Olivia's final truth. But be warned, Michael. By finding this, you've just stepped onto a path that Olivia walked. A path that leads directly into the heart of the city that runs on secrets. And once you're on it, there's no turning back. The words echoed in Michael's mind, a chilling prophecy that tightened its grip around his chest. He stood there, the weight of the message heavy in his hands, the air around him suddenly charged with an unseen electricity. Olivia's final truth. A path with no turning back. His gaze fell to the small, intricately carved wooden box he'd discovered, hidden behind a false panel in Olivia's old writing desk. It was dark, polished walnut, cool beneath his fingertips, and locked with a delicate, almost invisible clasp. He remembered the tarnished silver key he'd found tucked into the lining of Olivia's favorite winter coat, long after her death. A key he'd dismissed as an antique trinket, a memento of some forgotten trip. Now its purpose screamed at him. His hands trembled slightly as he retrieved it, the small, elaborate teeth of the key aligning perfectly with the box's lock. A soft click, barely audible, broke the silence of the apartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay not a single scroll, but a collection of disparate objects. First, a stack of what appeared to be old business cards, each for a different obscure establishment: the Written Word Bookstore, Ember and Ash Tailors, the Gilded Compass Antiques. Most seemed long defunct, their typefaces archaic, their addresses hinting at forgotten corners of the city. On the back of each card, handwritten in Olivia's elegant, familiar script, was a single letter or number, seemingly random, devoid of context. Next, a small tarnished silver locket, unadorned, its surface smooth and cold. And finally, a single yellow piece of paper folded precisely. Michael unfolded it with care, his eyes scanning Olivia's familiar handwriting once more. It read, "The labyrinth's heartbeats under the whispering arch seek the archivist." A cold dread seeped into him, deeper than any he'd felt before. This wasn't a note left by a victim. It was a breadcrumb trail laid by someone deeply entrenched, someone playing a dangerous game. The warning about the city that runs on secrets resonated with a terrifying clarity. These weren't just clues to a killer. They were keys to an entire hidden world. He laid out the business cards, trying to make sense of the scattered letters and numbers. T-A-R-K-I-V. And then numbers. 1, 0, 2, 6. It took him several minutes, his mind racing through anagrams and ciphers, before a pattern emerged. The letters, when rearranged, spelled archive. The numbers, October 26th. Clearly a date. Archive, he whispered, the word feeling heavy on his tongue. And the labyrinth's heartbeats under the whispering arch. These were not just locations. They were riddles, pieces of a larger, more intricate puzzle. And the archivist. Was that a person? A title? His gaze fell upon the business card for the Written Word Bookstore. Unlike the others, which seemed to belong to businesses long swallowed by time, he had a faint recollection of passing a dusty, old bookstore with a similar name in a historic district on the edge of downtown. It was a long shot, but it was a tangible lead, a place he could physically go. The urgency was a gnawing beast in his gut. Olivia's message, the implied danger, the sheer cryptic nature of it all. He had to move. He grabbed his keys, the business cards, and the cryptic note, leaving the rest of the box's contents untouched. The apartment, once a place of mournful reflection, now felt like a threshold, a gateway to something far more sinister. The bookstore was exactly as he remembered. A narrow, unassuming storefront, its windows crammed with stacks of forgotten paperbacks and yellowed hardcovers. A faint scent of aged paper and dust motes danced in the muted light filtering through the grimy glass. A bell above the door jingled softly as he entered, announcing his presence to the lone figure behind a towering counter made of stacked books. She was an older woman, perhaps in her late 60s, with a sharp, intelligent gaze that seemed to miss nothing. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her spectacles perched precariously on her nose as she meticulously alphabetized a pile of first editions. Her name, he'd later learn, was Eleanor. "Can I help you, young man?" she asked, her voice a dry rustle, like turning the page of an old book. "Yes, I hope so," Michael began, feeling an unexpected tremor in his voice. He pulled out the business card for the Written Word Bookstore. "I found this among some of my late friend's belongings. Olivia Hayes. She used to frequent this place, I believe." Eleanor's eyes, which had been merely observant, now sharpened, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "Olivia," she mused, the name a whisper. Yes, Olivia was a regular. Not just for books, mind you. Olivia had a thirst for knowledge that went beyond the printed page. She paused, her gaze piercing Michael. "And you are?" "Michael. Michael Sterling." I'm trying to understand what happened to her. Eleanor slowly pushed her spectacles up her nose, her eyes never leaving his. What happened to Olivia, Mr. Sterling, is a story far older and deeper than any you'll find on these shelves. Olivia was involved. She picked up the business card he placed on the counter, turning it over to reveal Olivia's handwritten T. A slight smile, almost imperceptible, touched her lips. This and the others, they were part of her quest. Her attempt to shine a light into the shadows. Shadows? Michael pressed, leaning closer. What shadows? Eleanor sighed, a sound laden with years of unspoken secrets. The city that runs on secrets, Mr. Sterling, is not merely a metaphor. It is a living, breathing entity, a network woven into the very fabric of this city. Its inhabitants call themselves the keepers of the city's pulse. They deal in information, in influence, in the subtle manipulation of power. They know everything, see everything, and control far more than anyone realizes. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Olivia was part of this network? She was for a time, Eleanor confirmed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But Olivia was different. She didn't seek to profit from the secrets. She sought to expose them. She believed such power, unchecked, would ultimately corrupt the city's soul. She was trying to dismantle it, to reveal the labyrinth's heart for what it truly was. And the archivist? Michael asked, remembering the note. Eleanor's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The archivist is the hub, the central repository of all the city's secrets. The one who remembers everything, who connects all the threads. Olivia was getting dangerously close to uncovering the archivist's identity. She leaned forward, her voice barely audible. You have Archive and 1026. And the labyrinth's heart beats under the Whispering Arch. You must go to the Archway Gallery. The Whispering Arch is a specific architectural feature within its older, forgotten wings. On October 26th at precisely 10:26 p.m., a message will reveal itself, but only to those who know how to look, those who are truly ready to see. Michael's mind reeled. October 26th. He checked his phone. Today was the 26th. Tonight. The urgency was no longer a beast, but a roaring inferno. Be careful, Michael Sterling, Eleanor warned, her voice regaining its dry, authoritative tone. By following Olivia's path, you've inherited her quest, and her enemies. The keepers do not tolerate those who threaten their control. They are always watching. He left the bookstore in a daze, the scent of old paper clinging to his clothes, Eleanor's words echoing in his ears. The city around him, once familiar, now seemed to shimmer with a hidden layer, a network of unseen eyes and unheard whispers. He was no longer just a friend seeking answers. He was a pawn, or perhaps a player, in a game whose rules he barely understood. He hailed a cab, his destination the Archway Gallery, an imposing stone structure dating back to the late 19th century, known for its vast collection of classical art and its labyrinthine corridors. The ride was a blur of flashing city lights and mounting anxiety. He felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, a growing certainty that he was being watched. Every shadow seemed to deepen, every passing car a potential tale. Arriving at the gallery, he found its grand entrance already closed for the night, but Eleanor's words about forgotten wings and older sections resonated. He circled the building, his heart pounding, until he found a less conspicuous side entrance, usually reserved for staff or deliveries, half obscured by overgrown ivy. To his surprise, it was unlocked. A silent invitation or a trap? He pushed through, stepping into a dimly lit service corridor. Following the faint glow of emergency lights, he navigated through a maze of storage rooms and maintenance closets, the air growing colder, dustier. He consulted the old floor plan he'd found online, searching for any mention of an Archway Gallery. It took him nearly 20 minutes, each minute feeling like an hour, before he located it. It was a secluded, rarely used alcove in an older, disused section of the gallery, leading to what appeared to be a dead-end wall. And there it was, a grand ornate archway, carved from dark, polished wood, adorned with faded gilding. It stood alone, framing nothing but the bare stone wall beyond. The Whispering Arch. He checked his watch. 10:25 p.m. 1 minute. His breath hitched in his throat. The silence of the gallery pressed in, amplifying the frantic beat of his own heart. He moved closer to the arch, his eyes scanning every inch of its intricate carvings, searching for something, anything. Then, precisely as his watch clicked to 10:26 p.m., the overhead emergency lights in the corridor flickered, just once. When they stabilized, a faint, almost imperceptible beam of light, like a tiny laser, emanated from a hidden crevice in the archway's apex. It danced across the stone wall, illuminating a single small circular indentation, barely larger than a thumbprint. It had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. He pressed his thumb into the indentation. With a soft mechanical whir, a small square section of the stone wall slid inward, revealing a shallow dark recess. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, lay two objects. A small leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age, its cover embossed with a single unadorned initial, O, and beside it an antique silver pocket watch, its hands frozen at 10:26. He reached in, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of the watch, the worn leather of the diary. As he pulled them free, a faint, almost inaudible creak echoed from the corridor behind him. A floorboard. He wasn't alone. He spun around, the diary clutched in his hand, his eyes darting into the shadows. Standing at the far end of the corridor, partially obscured by the gloom, was a figure. Tall, cloaked in darkness, unmoving. A silent sentinel watching him. Michael's blood ran cold. He had found Olivia's diary, stepped onto her path, and now he was being watched. The city had claimed him. Michael's blood ran cold. He had found Olivia's diary, stepped onto her path, and now he was being watched. The city had claimed him. Every nerve in Michael's body screamed. He froze, not daring to breathe, his eyes straining through the oppressive gloom. The figure was still there, unmoving, a deeper shadow within the shadows. It felt less like a person and more like an extension of the building itself. A silent, predatory gargoyle observing its prey. A primal fear seized him, the kind that bypasses logic and goes straight for the ancient part of the brain that screams run. But he couldn't. Not yet. His legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot by a horrifying fascination. Who was this? What did they want? Had they been following him since he first picked up Olivia's case? Or had they only just discovered his intrusion? The questions swirled, a frantic tempest in his mind, but no answers presented themselves from the still, dark form. He forced himself to take a slow, shallow breath, the stale air thick with dust and unseen menace. He blinked hard, trying to pierce the darkness, to discern any feature, any movement. Nothing. The figure remained an absolute silhouette against the faint, diffuse glow of the city lights filtering in from the distant street. It was as if the darkness itself had coalesced into a human shape. Then a flicker. Or was it just his eyes playing tricks? He blinked again, and this time the shadow seemed to ripple, to shift, to recede. It wasn't a quick movement, but a gradual dissolution, like ink spreading into water, or a dream fading upon waking. One moment it was distinct, menacing, and the next it was gone, absorbed back into the pervasive gloom of the abandoned building. The space where it had stood was now just empty, oppressive darkness. Michael let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding escape. He scrambled backward, tripping over unseen debris, his hands instinctively clutching the worn leather diary. He didn't stop until his back hit the cold, damp wall on the opposite side of the room. He slid down, adrenaline coursing through him, leaving a metallic taste in his mouth. He was alone again. Or was he? The silence that followed felt heavier, more watchful than before. Every creak of the old building, every distant city hum, seemed amplified, imbued with a new sinister meaning. He pulled out his phone, the screen's sudden glow a harsh intrusion into the darkness, illuminating his trembling hands. His fingers fumbled, but he managed to activate the flashlight, sweeping its beam across the empty space where the figure had been. Nothing. Just dust, cobwebs, and the skeletal remains of forgotten machinery. The rational part of his brain tried to assert itself. It was just a shadow, his mind playing tricks. The stress of the investigation, the isolation, the creeping dread of Olivia's story, it was all getting to him. But the primal fear persisted, cold and undeniable. He had seen it, and the diary, clutched in his hand, was a tangible reminder that he wasn't imagining things. Olivia had been digging into something dangerous, something that wanted to remain hidden, and now he was doing the same. He knew he couldn't stay there. The building, once merely eerie, now felt actively hostile. He needed to get out to somewhere safe, somewhere he could process this, somewhere he could read the diary without feeling eyes on his back. With renewed urgency, Michael pushed himself up, his muscles stiff and protesting. He didn't bother trying to retrace his steps carefully, practically stumbling through the labyrinthine corridors, guided only by the faint light from his phone and an overwhelming instinct to escape. He climbed down the rusted fire escape, his hands slick with sweat, his mind racing. He didn't relax until his feet hit the grimy pavement of the alleyway, and he was striding purposefully toward the main street, blending into the sparse late-night pedestrian traffic. He didn't go home. His apartment, usually a sanctuary, now felt exposed, its large windows a potential vulnerability. He needed anonymity, a public space where he could be observed without being specifically targeted. He found a small, all-night diner, its fluorescent lights buzzing, its air thick with the smell of stale coffee and frying oil. He slipped into a booth at the back, facing the entrance, the diary still clutched tightly in his hand. He ordered a black coffee, his voice raspy, and then with trembling fingers, he opened Olivia's journal. The pages felt heavier now, imbued with a new, chilling significance. Every word, every hurried scrawl, was a breadcrumb left by a woman who knew she was walking into danger. He flipped past the entries he'd already read, past her initial excitement and growing unease, until he reached the more recent dates, the ones where her optimism had curdled into outright fear. October 17th, he read. Olivia's elegant script now noticeably more agitated. The pieces are fitting together, but the picture they form is monstrous. It's not just about influence or even corruption. It's about control. Total, absolute control woven into the very fabric of this city. They call themselves the architects. Not for what they build, but for what they design, the lives of everyone here. The careers, the opportunities, even the truth. Michael paused, the word architects echoing in his mind. It sounded like something out of a conspiracy theory. Yet Olivia's words were too real, too desperate. He took a sip of his bitter coffee, its warmth doing little to thaw the ice in his veins. He continued reading. They operate through layers like an onion. The public faces, the philanthropists, the city council, even the police chiefs. They're just the outer skin. Beneath that are the overseers, the ones who implement the architect's will. And beneath them, the watchers. Michael's breath hitched. The watchers. The figure in the abandoned building. It wasn't a figment of his imagination. Olivia had known about them. She had documented them. A cold dread settled deep in his stomach. The watchers are everywhere, the diary continued. They're the silent eyes, the ears in the shadows. They monitor, they report, they enforce. They ensure no one deviates from the plan. No one asks too many questions. I've seen them. Not clearly, never clearly. Always at the periphery, a glimpse, a feeling. I thought I was paranoid, but I'm not. They are real. And they know I'm close. A chill ran down Michael's spine. Olivia's words were a mirror of his own experience just moments ago. She had felt the same unseen presence, the same unsettling surveillance. He was walking directly into her footsteps, and the watchers were now on his trail too. Their power isn't just political or financial, Olivia had written. It's psychological. They cultivate an atmosphere of subtle fear, of unspoken rules. People self-regulate. They don't rock the boat because they feel watched, even if they can't explain why. It's brilliant, insidious, the ultimate form of social engineering. And the secrets aren't just information. They're the means by which this control is maintained. Every prominent family, every successful business, every rising politician, they all have something the architects hold over them, something that keeps them compliant. Michael felt a profound sense of nausea. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. This was a deep, pervasive rot at the heart of the city he called home. He thought of the influential figures he'd met, the polite smiles, the carefully worded evasions. Were they all puppets, dancing to the architect's tune, afraid of what secrets might be revealed if they stepped out of line? He flipped to the next page, Olivia's writing growing more frantic, almost illegible in places. I found a pattern, a meeting place. It's obscure, hidden in plain sight. They use it to exchange information, to receive directives, to ensure the system is running smoothly. It's an old place, a relic. A library, but not just any library. The old city archives. Michael's eyes widened. The old city archives. He knew the building. It was a beautiful, imposing structure, rarely used now, overshadowed by the modern public library downtown. It was mostly for historical preservation, a dusty repository of forgotten documents, hidden in plain sight. It made perfect sense. Who would suspect such a place? They meet on the eve of the citywide Heritage Festival. Olivia's entry continued, dated just days before her disappearance. It's a symbolic date for them, a reinforcement of their legacy. The festival is a distraction, a grand public display of unity, while the real power consolidates in the shadows. I need to get in there. I need to record it. I need proof. If I can expose their methods, their faces, then maybe, just maybe, this city can breathe again. Michael looked at the date. The Heritage Festival. It was next week. Olivia had planned to infiltrate the archives then. Had she succeeded? Was that why she disappeared? Had she gotten too close, found too much? He reread the entry, his mind racing. The old city archives. The Heritage Festival. It was a clear, actionable lead. But it was also the very path that had led Olivia to her doom. He was being watched. The architects, the overseers, the watchers, they were real. They were powerful. And they knew he was digging. A wave of fear, cold and sharp, washed over him. He was out of his depth. This wasn't a case for a freelance investigator. This was a war against an invisible enemy. An enemy that controlled the very pulse of the city. He could walk away. He could close the diary, forget everything, and try to go back to his ordinary life. But as the thought crossed his mind, he knew it was impossible. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen, couldn't unread what he'd read. Olivia's desperate plea, her courage in the face of such a terrifying truth, resonated deep within him. He had to finish what she started. He closed the diary, its leather cover warm beneath his fingers. His coffee had gone cold. He looked up, scanning the diner. A few patrons, a tired waitress. Nothing overtly suspicious. But the paranoia was now a constant companion, a subtle hum beneath the surface of his consciousness. He felt it in the way the shadows danced in the corners, in the way a car slowed on the street outside, in the way the diner door chimed when a new customer entered. The city had claimed him, and now he was going to claim some answers. He would go to the old city archives. He would follow Olivia's last, desperate lead. He just had to make sure he wasn't followed there himself. The hum of the city was a constant, low thrum against Michael's skin, a reminder of its omnipresent awareness. He moved through the labyrinthine streets with a heightened sense of paranoia, every shadow a potential observer, every distant siren a warning echo meant for him. He avoided the sleek, automated transit lines, opting instead for a circuitous route on foot, ducking into alleyways, doubling back, and using the dense crowds as a shifting camouflage. The air grew heavier, cooler, as he ventured away from the glittering towers of the central district, deeper into the forgotten corners where the city's modern veneer peeled away to reveal its grittier, older foundations. The old city archive stood like a forgotten sentinel, a monolithic structure of dark, weathered stone, its Gothic architecture a stark contrast to the glass and steel that dominated the skyline. Ivy, thick and ancient, clung to its walls like clutching fingers, and dust motes danced in the anemic light filtering through its tall, narrow windows. A heavy, ornate iron gate, rusted at its hinges, groaned as he pushed it open, the sound echoing ominously in the sudden silence of the courtyard. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged paper, dust, and something else, a faint metallic tang, like old secrets slowly oxidizing. He found the main reading room dimly lit, rows upon rows of towering shelves disappearing into the gloom. A single hunched figure sat behind a massive oak desk, framed by a halo of light from a flickering desk lamp. Martha, the archivist, was every bit the stereotype. Spectacles perched on the tip of her nose, a severe bun of gray hair, and eyes that had seen more historical documents than human faces. "Can I help you?" Her voice was raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. She didn't look up from the fragile ledger she was scrutinizing. Michael approached, trying to project an air of calm authority he didn't feel. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Michael Sterling. I'm researching early city planning commissions, particularly anything related to the original infrastructure projects. I understand you have records dating back to the city's founding." Martha finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes, magnified by her thick lenses, were sharp, assessing. "Early planning? Most of that is digitized, Mr. Sterling. Accessible by public terminal downstairs. Unless you're looking for something Specific. He swallowed, the lie feeling thin and transparent. I'm interested in the unlisted projects. The ones that might have been deemed too ambitious for public record, perhaps. There was a colleague, Olivia Vance, who mentioned some intriguing anomalies in the early land deeds, particularly those surrounding what's now the old financial district. She suggested there might be some supplementary documents here, perhaps even original blueprints, that never made it to the public database. At the mention of Olivia's name, a subtle shift occurred in Martha's demeanor. Her gaze sharpened further, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps suspicion in her eyes. She put down her ledger slowly, deliberately. Olivia Vance. Yes, she was here. About a month ago. Very persistent. Asked a lot of questions about the same period. Didn't find anything as far as I know. She was looking for something specific, wasn't she? Michael pressed, a desperate hope blooming in his chest. Something about the true foundation of the city, not just the official narrative. Martha leaned back, her chair creaking under the strain. The city has many foundations, Mr. Sterling. Physical, economic, ethical, and some say even mystical. Olivia was interested in the physical, but also the less tangible aspects. She kept mentioning a sublevel network and Project Atlas. Sounded like a conspiracy theory to me. Michael felt a jolt. Project Atlas. Olivia had been onto something real, something she'd found here, even if Martha dismissed it. Did she file a request for specific documents related to Project Atlas or a sublevel network? Martha sighed, a long, weary sound. She did. And I told her, just as I'll tell you, that no such projects are officially listed in any public or even restricted archives. The city's foundational blueprints are publicly available. There's nothing called Project Atlas. It's a phantom. But her eyes, though dismissive, held a glint of something else. Curiosity, or perhaps a warning. But she must have been looking in a specific area, Michael insisted, pushing his luck. Maybe something adjacent to those terms. An old land survey, a particular city council report that seemed innocuous but held a hidden key. Martha studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Olivia Vance was thorough, and she had a way of looking at things from a different angle. She spent most of her time in the restricted section, under the guise of researching archaic energy grids. A rather clever cover, I thought. She motioned vaguely towards a heavy, steel-reinforced door at the back of the room. Access to that section requires special clearance, which I doubt you possess, Mr. Sterling. Even Olivia struggled. But she did get in, didn't she? Michael's voice was barely a whisper. And she found something. What was her last request? What was the final document she accessed or attempted to access before she left? Martha hesitated, her gaze drifting to a small, framed photograph on her desk. A younger Martha, smiling beside a stern-looking man. She seemed to be weighing something, a decision playing out behind her eyes. Finally, she said, she was looking for a specific box. Box 713, tagged as Miscellaneous City Utility Plans Pre-Incorporation. It was a dead end. Nothing but old water pipe schematics and forgotten wiring diagrams. I told her as much. May I see box 713? Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Martha's lips thinned. It's in the restricted section, Mr. Sterling. And it's just old pipes. Please, ma'am. Olivia was a dear friend. Her disappearance, it's been devastating. I just need to retrace her steps to see what she saw. Maybe I'll notice something she missed, something that could explain where she went. He injected as much genuine anguish into his voice as he could muster. Her stern expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Very well, but you'll have to sign the restricted access log, and I'll be watching. No photographs, no unauthorized copies. And you touch nothing but box 713. He nodded vehemently. Martha rose, a surprisingly agile movement for her age, and retrieved a large brass key from a hidden drawer. The heavy door to the restricted section groaned open, revealing a deeper, colder darkness. The air inside was even heavier, charged with the weight of unseen history. Michael followed her into the labyrinth of shelves, dust motes swirling in the beam of Martha's ancient flashlight. She led him to a particular aisle, its shelves packed with archaic-looking boxes, each labeled with faded script. She pointed to a box on the third shelf. 713 there. You have an hour. I'll be at my desk. He pulled the box down carefully, feeling the grit of ancient dust against his fingers. The lid creaked as he opened it. Inside, just as Martha had said, were bundles of yellowed schematics, rolled tight and tied with brittle twine. Water pipes, electrical conduits, sewage lines, all for a city that barely resembled the one he knew. He unrolled one, then another, his heart sinking with each mundane diagram. This was a dead end. Olivia couldn't have spent days here just for this. He worked methodically, unrolling each document, scanning the faded ink for anything unusual, any annotation, any symbol, any name that stood out. His fingers brushed against a thicker, heavier roll at the very bottom of the box. It wasn't tied with twine. It was encased in a brittle wax-sealed canvas. This felt different. He carefully broke the seal, the wax crumbling to dust. He unrolled the canvas, revealing a set of blueprints far more intricate, more complex, than anything else in the box. They were not for water pipes. These were architectural drawings, but for something vast, subterranean, and incredibly secure. Titled in stark, precise lettering, Project Atlas Sublevel Network, Phase 1 Layouts. His breath caught in his throat. Project Atlas. Olivia hadn't been imagining it. It was real. The blueprints detailed a sprawling network of tunnels, reinforced chambers, and vast, cavernous spaces beneath the city, far deeper than any known subway system or utility grid. There were diagrams for advanced ventilation systems, independent power conduits, and what looked like massive vault-like structures. But what truly sent a shiver down his spine were the smaller, almost hidden annotations. References to sensory input nodes, data processing cores, and a chilling phrase repeated several times: subject containment zones. This wasn't just infrastructure. This was a sophisticated, hidden apparatus. A system designed not for the city's public utilities, but for something far more sinister. It was a control mechanism, a living, breathing entity beneath the city, feeding on its very essence. He flipped through the additional sheets, his hands trembling. One page listed a series of names, not architects or engineers, but prominent figures from the city's early days, industrialists, politicians, even a renowned psychologist. These were the true founders, the architects of Project Atlas. And at the bottom of the list, almost obscured by a coffee stain, was a single cryptic phrase: the heart of Atlas lies within the old clock tower. The old clock tower. It stood in the exact center of the old financial district, a landmark, but also a relic, long since abandoned. It was always there, a silent observer. But if these blueprints were correct, it was more than just a building. It was the central control point, the nexus. A faint creak echoed from the main reading room. Michael froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He wasn't alone. He had been so engrossed, so desperate for answers, that he'd let his guard down. Had Martha heard him? Or was it someone else? He quickly re-rolled the blueprints, shoving them back into the canvas, then back into box 713. He couldn't take them, Martha was watching. But he had the crucial information. He had the name, Project Atlas. He had the location, the old clock tower. A shadow fell across the aisle, not from Martha's side, but from deeper within the restricted section. A heavy, deliberate tread. Someone was approaching from behind him. Michael spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for something, anything, to defend himself. The figure emerged from the gloom, tall and imposing, their face obscured by the deep shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. They didn't speak, but the air around them crackled with a silent, menacing energy. Michael could feel their eyes on him, cold and unwavering. He had found the city's deepest secret. And now the city had come for him. The cold, unwavering gaze of the silent figures in wide-brimmed hats pierced through Michael. He stood frozen, the damp air of the forgotten tunnel suddenly heavy with an unspoken threat. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet felt cemented to the grimy floor. He had found it, the truth behind the city's impossible prosperity, the answer to the whispers and the disappearances. And now the city was here to reclaim what was hers. One of the figures, the tallest of the three, took a slow, deliberate step forward. The brim of his hat dipped, obscuring his face further, but Michael felt the intensity of his stare. There was no aggression, no overt menace, just an absolute chilling certainty. Michael finally found his voice, a ragged whisper. "What do you want?" No answer. The figure simply raised a hand, and in that gesture, Michael saw not an invitation, but a command. Before he could react, Another figure was behind him, a presence he hadn't detected until now. A sudden sharp prick in his neck, and a wave of dizziness washed over him. His legs buckled. The tunnel spun. He tried to fight, to lash out, but his muscles felt like lead. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the impassive, almost serene face of the third figure, watching him fall. He awoke to a dull ache in his head and a disorienting sense of movement. He was lying on something hard and cold, his hands bound behind him. The air was sterile, a stark contrast to the musty tunnel. He blinked, trying to clear the fog from his mind. He was in a vehicle, a sleek, windowless compartment, moving with a silent, almost gliding motion. The same three figures sat opposite him, unmoving, their hats still shrouding their faces. They were guardians, silent sentinels, and their presence was suffocating. Time blurred. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, his voice a rasp. He tried to remember what he had seen in the archive, the final piece of the puzzle that had led him here. The blueprints, the schematics. The truth wasn't a hidden vault of gold, or a secret society controlling the markets. It was something far more insidious, far more fundamental. The vehicle finally stopped with a soft hiss. A panel slid open, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor. The figures rose, their movements synchronized, almost robotic. They motioned for him to get out. He struggled, but a firm grip on his arm guided him forward. His legs were still weak, his mind hazy, but the fear was a sharp, clarifying blade. The corridor was metallic, utilitarian, devoid of any decoration. It felt like the inside of a massive machine. They passed countless identical doors, each one humming faintly. The air grew colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible thrum vibrated through the floor. It was the sound of something immense, something powerful running beneath them. They stopped at a door unlike the others, wider, darker, with a single glowing symbol etched into its surface, a stylized eye within a spiral. The door slid open without a sound, revealing a vast circular chamber. The ceiling was high, lost in shadow, and the walls were lined with screens displaying arcane symbols and shifting patterns of light. In the center of the chamber, suspended above a swirling vortex of blue light, was a single, empty chair. "Welcome, Michael," a voice echoed through the chamber, calm and resonant, yet utterly bodiless. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You have traveled far. You have sought answers. And you have found them." Michael stood defiant despite his trembling knees. "What is this place? What have you done with Emily? With David?" The swirling blue light pulsed. "This is the heart of the city, the engine that sustains her. And Emily and David, they are part of her now, just as you will be." A chill far colder than the chamber air swept through Michael. "What does that mean? What did I find?" "You found the truth," the voice replied, a hint of something almost like amusement in its tone. "The city does not run on money, Michael. Not in the way you understand it. It runs on secrets. Not whispers in the dark, but the very essence of human experience. The unspoken fears, the hidden desires, the suppressed traumas, the unshared joys. The raw, unfiltered data of the human soul." Michael stared, his mind struggling to grasp the concept. You extract them? We cultivate them," the voice corrected. "The city was built on a unique resonance, a natural nexus of psychic energy, a place where the veil between thought and reality is thin. Over centuries we learned to harness this, to refine it, to draw forth the most potent, the most volatile, the most valuable secrets. These aren't merely memories, Michael. They are the very fabric of identity, the raw material of consciousness." The blue vortex beneath the empty chair intensified, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Every secret held, every truth concealed, creates a unique energetic signature. The more profound the secret, the stronger the signature. And the city, she feeds on these signatures. They are her power, her currency, her very lifeblood. They fuel her prosperity, her innovation, her impossible growth. "But how?" Michael demanded, his voice hoarse. "How do you extract them?" "Through a process of sympathetic resonance," the voice explained, devoid of emotion. "When an individual holds a secret of significant power and is brought into alignment with the city's core frequency, the secret can be transferred. Not stolen, Michael. Transferred. It leaves the individual, leaving them unburdened, free, a blank slate in a way, and it becomes part of the city's collective consciousness, fueling her further." A horrifying realization dawned on Michael. That's what happened to Emily. To David. They didn't just disappear. You emptied them. They were integrated. The voice corrected, cold and precise. Their most precious secrets now empower us. Emily's hidden grief for her lost sister. David's deep-seated ambition masked by apathy. These were potent energies. And you, Michael, you possess a secret of immense value. Michael felt a tremor run through him. He knew what it was. The one thing he had never told anyone, not even Jessica. The secret shame, the buried guilt. The moment of weakness that had haunted him for years. He had thought it safely locked away, buried deep. Your secret, Michael, the voice continued, as if reading his thoughts. The one that drives your relentless pursuit of truth, your need to expose, to uncover. It is a powerful catalyst. A rare and potent energy. You have sought the heart of the city, and now the city will take yours. It will be a fair exchange. The figures in hats began to move, slowly, deliberately, towards him. Their silence was more terrifying than any threat. Michael felt a surge of adrenaline cutting through the haze. He wouldn't let them take it. He wouldn't become a blank slate, another empty shell wandering the city's streets. No, he rasped, struggling against his bonds. You won't get it. You won't get my secret. The voice chuckled, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Oh, but we will, Michael. It is not a matter of choice. It is a matter of resonance. You have tuned yourself to our frequency, sought us out. You are already primed. And as for your friend Jessica, she too has a secret, one that has brought her closer to the truth than she realizes. A secret that binds her to you and to the city. She is not as far behind you as you might think. The last words hung in the air, a new layer of dread settling over Michael. Jessica, what secret did she hold that the city would want? And was she already caught in their web? The figures were upon him now, their touch cold, impersonal. He felt himself being lifted, propelled towards the swirling blue vortex, towards the empty chair in the center of the chamber. He fought with every fiber of his being, a desperate, primal struggle against an unseen force, against the inevitable. He had found the city's deepest secret, and now, he was about to become the city's next sacrifice. His secret, his very essence, was about to be devoured. BER of his being, a desperate, primal struggle against an unseen force, against the inevitable. He had found the city's deepest secret, and now, he was about to become the city's next sacrifice. His secret, his very essence, was about to be devoured. A searing, icy hand seemed to plunge into his mind. Not a physical touch, but an invasion of pure, unadulterated energy. Michael gasped, his lungs burning, but no sound escaped. It was as if his very breath was being stolen, along with everything else. He felt a profound, alien presence begin to unravel him, thread by thread, memory by memory. His childhood home, the scent of his mother's cooking, the sound of his father's laughter, they flashed before his internal eye, vibrant and real, only to be yanked away, like photographs torn from an album by an invisible hand. He saw Jessica's face, her worried frown, her determined eyes, and a wave of pure agony washed over him. He clung to her image, to the warmth of her hand in his, to the shared dreams they had woven together, but even that began to fray. It was a violation far beyond physical pain, a systematic dismantling of his identity, a theft of his very soul. He fought back with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed, a primal scream echoing in the silent chambers of his mind, trying to grasp onto any piece of himself that remained. But the force was relentless, methodical. He was inside the core now, a vast, pulsating chamber of pure, crystalline light, humming with an energy that vibrated through his bones. The light wasn't just illumination. It was a conduit, a network of immense power. Tendrils of this light, like ethereal roots, began to extend from the walls, not touching him physically, but probing, reaching, entering his consciousness. He understood now. This was the grid, the true grid, not the benign network of connectivity the city advertised, but a monstrous parasitic entity that fed on the unique imprint of every individual. The city didn't just run on secrets. It was secrets. It absorbed them, processed them, and distilled them into the very energy that powered its impossible perfection. Every memory, every dream, every fear, every unspoken truth. It was all grist for this colossal, insatiable mill. The blank stares of the citizens, the quiet compliance, the absence of dissent. It wasn't just indoctrination. It was the result of this process, the slow, agonizing extraction of individuality until only a docile, programmable shell remained. He saw flashes of others' countless faces, their unique stories being ripped from them, fueling the city's endless hum. He saw people he recognized from the city streets, people he'd passed, their lives laid bare and then emptied. He saw a young woman's first love, a man's regret over a broken promise, a child's innocent wonder, all reduced to raw data, to energy. And then he saw a familiar face, a face that made his heart clench with a fresh wave of terror. David. David wasn't here, not physically, but a trace of him, a sliver of his identity, was being pulled into the same vortex. Michael realized with dawning horror that David had also been close to the truth, had also been marked. The city didn't just take secrets when you found them. It collected them over time, slowly, subtly, until the moment of final extraction. David's research, his probing questions, his very curiosity, it had made him a target, a future energy source. Overwhelmed, Michael felt his grip on reality slipping. His own memories became fragmented, his sense of self dissolving into a chaotic torrent of light and sensation. He was losing himself. He was becoming one more anonymous secret in the city's vast, cold archive. Meanwhile, miles away, in the hushed, sterile confines of the city's central archive, Emily and David were closing in. They had followed Michael's last known data trail, a series of encrypted breadcrumbs he had cleverly left, knowing he might be compromised. The trail led them not to a public terminal, but to a forgotten sublevel, a place the city's omnipresent surveillance seemed to ignore. "This is it," David whispered, his voice tight with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "Michael's last entry point. It's connected to an old data hub, predating the current grid system. Almost like a back door." Emily nodded, her fingers flying across the antique interface Michael had instructed them to find. Dust motes danced in the single beam of her flashlight, illuminating shelves of forgotten data drives and archaic server racks. "He must have known this place existed," she murmured. "A blind spot in their system." Suddenly, the screen flickered to life, displaying a fragmented map of the city's underground infrastructure, far more complex and intricate than any public blueprints. A single pulsing red dot marked a location deep beneath the city's oldest district. That's where the whispers come from," Emily breathed, recalling Michael's earlier theories. "He called it the heart of the machine dot. And look at this," David pointed, his finger tracing a faint, almost invisible line connecting the red to a network of smaller, radiating nodes. "These aren't data lines, Emily. These are energy conduits, and they lead to every major sector, every residential block, every public building." A sudden violent surge of static crackled through the old system, making the screen distort. A single word, distorted and broken, flashed across the display. "Michael!" Emily's heart leaped into her throat. "He's trying to communicate. He's in danger." "No, it's not a message," David corrected, his face pale. "It's a signature. His unique identity signature. It's being pulled. It's like a data stream being rerouted, but it's him." He looked at Emily, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization. "The city isn't just collecting information, Emily. It's collecting people. Or rather, what makes them people." He remembered his own recent dizzy spells, the fleeting moments of disorientation, the feeling of something almost being plucked from his mind. He had dismissed it as stress, as exhaustion. Now, a cold dread settled deep in his stomach. Michael wasn't just investigating the city's secrets. He was becoming one of them. Emily, ever the pragmatist, forced herself to focus. There has to be a way to stop it. If Michael is still sending out a signature, however faint, there's still a part of him left. She typed furiously, trying to trace the signature, to find its origin point. But the old system was struggling, overwhelmed by the sheer power emanating from the red dot. The air grew heavy, charged with an invisible current, making the hairs on their arms stand on end. "The city is alive," David whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's a living, breathing entity feeding on us." Then, a new set of data appeared on the screen, not from Michael, but from the city's own internal diagnostics. A massive energy spike originating from the red dot, a processing event of unprecedented scale. "They're not just taking his secrets," David said, his voice laced with horror. "They're taking him. All of him. And they're doing it now." Back in the shimmering core, Michael was losing the battle. His vision blurred, his thoughts fragmented. He could feel the last vestiges of his identity being siphoned away, his unique consciousness being absorbed into the vast, collective hum of the city. He saw his parents, his friends, Jessica, David, Emily, their faces fading like old photographs bleached by the sun. He tried to remember their names, their voices, but they were becoming echoes in a rapidly emptying chamber. A profound sense of peace began to settle over him, not a true peace, but the chilling calm of utter surrender. The struggle was too great, the force too immense. He was becoming part of the city, a tiny, insignificant drop in its endless ocean of stolen souls. His purpose, his mission, his very existence was dissolving. He was no longer Michael. He was just data, but then an anomaly, a flicker, a momentary disruption in the seamless flow of energy, a whisper, almost imperceptible, breaking through the overwhelming hum. It was a fragment of a memory, a specific, potent one. The look in Jessica's eyes the day they decided to leave their old lives behind, to seek a new beginning in this perfect city. Her hope, her trust, her belief in him. It was a secret he hadn't fully acknowledged even to himself. His deepest fear of failing her, of not being enough. And that fear, that intensely personal, raw emotion was still his. The city tried to absorb it, to process it, to neutralize it. But this particular secret, born of love and vulnerability, resonated differently. It wasn't just a fact or an experience. It was a potent, unyielding core of his being. It was the spark that had driven him, the quiet anxiety that had fueled his relentless search for truth. For a fleeting instant, the immense pressure on his mind eased, just enough for a single desperate thought to coalesce. He was being devoured, yes, but he wasn't entirely gone. Not yet. There was a part of him, a stubborn, terrified, loving part that still resisted. And in that infinitesimal window, as the city recalibrated to absorb this unexpected resistance, Michael saw it. The true source of the city's power. It wasn't just the aggregated secrets of its citizens. It was something far older, far more sinister. A single colossal secret, buried deep within the crystalline core itself. A secret that pulsed with an ancient, malevolent energy. It was the original sin of the city, the very foundation upon which its perfection was built, and it was waiting to consume him whole. He knew then, with chilling certainty, that this was not just about his secrets anymore. It was about the secret, the one that had started it all. And somehow, even as he faded, he had to tell someone. He had to warn them. The city of secrets was about to unveil its ultimate truth, and it would destroy everything. The dying man's grip was surprisingly strong, a desperate anchor in the swirling chaos of Michael's mind. His eyes, though clouded with pain, held a frantic urgency. "It's not about the secrets they collect," he rasped, a thin line of blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "It's about the secret they protect. The one the city was built to bury." He coughed, a wet, rattling sound, and then with his last breath, whispered a single name, a location, and a chilling phrase that echoed in the silence of the alley. "The Genesis vault under the old clock tower. They believe truth is the destroyer." Michael stared, numb as the man's eyes glazed over, his hand falling limp. The words hung in the air, heavy and dark. Truth is the destroyer. It was a paradox, a perversion of everything Michael believed. He knew the old clock tower. It was a historical landmark, a symbol of the city's enduring legacy, one of the few structures that predated the modern metropolis. A Genesis vault beneath it? What could possibly be so dangerous that an entire city, built on the intricate web of personal secrets, was designed around its containment? He left the alley, the dying man's final confession burning like a brand in his mind. Jessica was safe, he hoped, having gone to ground after their last close call. David, the journalist, was a wild card, but Michael knew he had to act alone now. The stakes had escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. This wasn't just about exposing corrupt officials or a privacy-invading council. This was about the very foundation of their world. The old clock tower stood sentinel in the city's historic district, its ancient gears a testament to time's relentless march. Beneath it, Michael found a barely visible access panel, long forgotten by everyday citizens, but clearly known to those who maintained the city's deepest secrets. His stolen access key, a relic from his infiltration of the council's network, hummed faintly as he pressed it to the lock. A heavy mechanism groaned, and a hidden stairway spiraled down into the earth, swallowed by darkness. The air grew heavy and cold, thick with the scent of dust and ancient stone. Michael descended, his footsteps echoing, the silence amplifying the frantic beat of his heart. At the bottom, a vast circular chamber opened up, unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were lined not with vaults or data servers, but with intricate, almost alien carvings. And in the center, bathed in the soft glow of emergency lights, stood a colossal, obsidian monolith. It hummed with a low, resonant energy, a silent testament to its profound age and purpose. As Michael approached, images flickered across its polished surface, not like a screen, but as if the stone itself was remembering. He saw glimpses of a world ravaged by chaos, a society tearing itself apart, not by war or plague, but by an inability to coexist with absolute, unvarnished truth. Arguments escalating into violence over minor deceptions, trust eroding into dust, communities fracturing because every hidden thought, every selfish motive, was laid bare for all to see. It was a world where no one could lie, and therefore no one could truly live together. The monolith showed a group of desperate founders, building their new city, a sanctuary, on the ashes of that transparent world. Their philosophy was stark, brutal, yet undeniably effective. If absolute truth destroys, then controlled secrets can create stability. They built the city, not just as a refuge, but as an elaborate mechanism to manage human interaction, to give people something to hide, something to leverage, something to focus on other than the devastating truth of their own inherent flaws. The secrets weren't just currency. They were a necessary distraction, a social lubricant, a controlled veil that allowed society to function. The ultimate secret wasn't a conspiracy to control, but a desperate act of preservation. The city was a grand illusion, a collective agreement to live in a carefully curated reality, where the small personal secrets kept the populace engaged and manageable, preventing them from gazing into the abyss of absolute, destructive truth that lay beyond its walls. The council weren't just power-hungry. They were the guardians of this fragile peace, the keepers of the ultimate foundational lie. A voice, calm and measured, broke the silence. "A beautiful lie, isn't it, Michael?" He spun around. Evelyn stood in the chamber entrance, her face impassive, her elegant suit a stark contrast to the ancient surroundings. She held no weapon, projecting an aura of absolute authority. "You knew I'd find it," Michael said, his voice raw. "We built this city for those who seek answers, Michael," Evelyn replied, walking towards him, her footsteps soft on the stone floor. "It's how we identify those who might threaten the delicate balance. Those who, like you, refuse to accept the narrative. The relentless truth seekers." "So the whole city, it's a cage?" Michael asked, gesturing to the monolith. "A way to keep people from seeing the truth about themselves, about the world." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Not a cage, Michael. A sanctuary. Imagine a world where every thought you ever had, every petty jealousy, every small deception, every unspoken desire, was instantly known to everyone around you. A world without privacy, without the subtle dance of human interaction. That was the world before. It collapsed under the weight of its own transparency. We learned that humanity cannot survive absolute truth. It needs its veils, its shadows, its secrets to tolerate itself. And you believe this is the solution?" Michael scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "To build a society on a foundation of managed lies? To make everyone pawns in your grand social experiment, their lives dictated by what you choose to reveal or conceal?" "It is not an experiment, Michael, it is survival," Evelyn countered, her voice gaining a quiet intensity. "Every secret collected, every piece of leverage gained, every life steered. It all serves to maintain the illusion, to keep the city stable, to prevent the return of the chaos. We are the shepherds of secrets, yes, but also the guardians of peace. We protect people from the one truth they cannot handle, that they are inherently flawed, and that absolute honesty would destroy them." She stopped before the monolith, placing a hand on its cool, dark surface. "This monolith records the history of that collapse. The Genesis Vault is not just a place for secrets, Michael. It is a warning, a monument to the destructive power of unbridled truth. Every generation has those who question, those who dig. And every generation we show them this. We show them the alternative. Most understand. They choose the illusion, because the reality is too terrifying." Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold chamber. He understood, intellectually, the terrifying logic. But his heart recoiled. "And what if I don't choose the illusion, Evelyn?" What if I choose to expose it all? To tell everyone what this city truly is? Evelyn turned, her eyes piercing. Then you would unleash a truth that would tear this city apart. The man in the alley understood. He knew that revealing the ultimate secret would destroy everything. Not just the council, Michael, but the very fabric of society. Panic, distrust, a return to the zero-sum game of absolute transparency. Do you truly believe humanity is ready for that again? Are you ready to be responsible for that destruction? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a persuasive murmur. You are intelligent, resourceful, a truth seeker. You see the flaws in our system, yes, but you also see its necessity, don't you? Imagine what you could achieve, Michael, working with us. Not as a pawn, but as a partner. Helping to manage the balance, to refine the illusion, to ensure this fragile piece endures. You could help us protect the city, not tear it down. The offer hung in the air, tempting and terrifying. A path to power, a way to influence, to perhaps even reform the system from within to make it less oppressive. Or a surrender, a betrayal of everything he had fought for, everything he believed. Michael looked from Evelyn's unwavering gaze to the ancient monolith, its silent images still flickering with the echoes of a broken world. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, heavier than any secret he had ever uncovered. He could choose stability, a controlled peace built on a lie. Or he could choose truth, with the very real risk of unleashing chaos, of destroying the only world these people knew, even if it was a false one. He thought of Jessica, her fierce independence, her refusal to be controlled. He thought of David, tirelessly chasing stories, believing in the power of information. He thought of all the lives he had seen manipulated, crushed, or elevated by the council's unseen hand. The peace Evelyn offered was real, but it came at the cost of genuine freedom, of genuine self-determination. It was a piece of ignorance. No, Michael said, his voice firm, resolute. Truth isn't the destroyer, Evelyn. Suppression is. Ignorance is. You've built a gilded cage, and you've convinced everyone they're free. But a lie, no matter how beautiful, is still a lie. Evelyn's expression hardened, a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. A tragic choice, Michael. You seek to save them, but you will only break them. Michael didn't waste another second. He pulled out the modified data drive he had prepared, containing everything he had found, the council's network schematics, the ledger of manipulated lives, and now the raw data from the monolith, a compressed history of the Genesis Vault and the founder's philosophy. He had wired it to automatically broadcast to every public network, every news outlet, every social media channel in the city, bypassing the council's firewalls with a surge of data designed to overwhelm. Maybe, Michael said, looking at Evelyn, a grim determination in his eyes. But at least they'll have the choice. At least they'll know. He slammed the drive into a concealed port he'd spotted on the monolith's base, a relic of its original data input. A single blinding flash erupted from the obsidian surface, followed by a high-pitched whine that vibrated through the chamber. Evelyn lunged, but it was too late. The data stream, raw and untethered, surged out, a torrent of information exploding across the city's networks. Across the city of secrets, screens flickered. News channels were interrupted by static, then replaced by the ancient, unsettling images from the monolith, accompanied by Michael's synthesized voice, explaining the ultimate truth of their city. The carefully curated reality shattered in an instant. People paused in the streets, in their homes, in their offices, their faces a mixture of confusion, shock, and dawning horror. The whispers began, growing into murmurs, then into shouts. The city for generations had run on secrets. Now it was about to run on the most dangerous secret of all, the truth about itself. Michael felt a surge of adrenaline, followed by a profound sense of exhaustion. He had done it. He had pulled back the veil. The future was uncertain, chaotic, terrifying. But for the first time, it was their own. The city that runs on secrets was no more. In its place, a city of newly awakened citizens, facing a choice they never knew they had. And the question lingered in the echoing silence of the Genesis Vault. Would they truly be free, or would the destructive power of truth simply repeat history, tearing them apart once more? Only time and their own choices would tell. The secrets were out. The city would never be the same. And Michael, standing amidst the ruins of a collapsed illusion, knew his own journey had only just begun.